Yo, listen up. What if the society you think of as history's greatest civilization was actually built on one of its dirtiest secrets? Today, we go in. The ancient Roman Empire, celebrated for centuries. But behind the marble columns and the senators' togas, a very different story was playing out. The filthy secrets, the double standards, the economy built on exploitation. Let's find out what Rome was really about. Let me introduce you to somebody. This is Lucille. She's 19 years old. And her story tells us everything we need to know about Rome. Lucille is deeply in debt. She works a minimum wage job, barely enough to pay rent, buy food, stay alive. The struggle was very, very real. No emergency savings, no cushion if she gets sick. Her rights? Extremely limited. Because in Rome, being a woman meant being less than. Society around her treated her as less than a man. Not a secret, Rome was famously upfront about how little it valued women. Her hourly wage in ancient Rome? Not even enough to buy 2 loaves of bread. Life was dangerous, demeaning, a daily grind with no way out. Lucille's story is the evidence. The double standards of Roman society, baked in from the very beginning. The ancient Roman Empire, the so-called height of Western civilization, celebrated for its roads, its laws, its culture. But behind that facade, 40% of men and women in Rome were slaves. 40%. Let that land. And slavery in Rome had nothing to do with skin color. It was about birthplace. If you weren't Roman, 8 out of 10 chance you were enslaved. Being a male slave was already a horror. But a female slave in Rome? That was arguably the worst fate a human being could face. Rome wasn't alone in this. Like ancient Greece before it, Roman civilization was openly, historically terrible in its treatment of women. Every balding Roman senator with land and gold in his pocket had every excuse imaginable to control women's lives. Every single one. Citizens on paper, but Roman women couldn't vote, couldn't hold office. Their entire expected role? Wife, mother, nothing else. Meanwhile, the men? Fully free to enjoy younger concubines on the side. No questions asked, no judgment from anyone. For a Roman woman, her education, her status, her freedom, all of it depended entirely on her father or her husband. The one thing that mattered for a Roman woman? Her purity. Women were expected to be the very symbol of Roman moral virtue. Of course, none of those purity rules applied to men, not a single one. Rome had a very particular definition of morality. And yet, conservative, chauvinistic Rome was absolutely packed with brothels, and those brothels were a major engine of the imperial economy. Why? The answer is far simpler than you'd imagine. Money, greed, wealth concentration, and pleasure. That's the whole story. The men who built this patriarchal society were the very same men who ran and profited from the brothel industry. Convenient, isn't it? Here's what they never tell you about Roman brothels. There were no red light districts, no restricted zones. They were everywhere, like market stalls. To run a brothel in ancient Rome, you just needed a bed. Not a building, not a license, a bed. Most Roman brothels operated as a sublet inside an inn or tavern, the caupone. Best place in town if you were looking to sow your wild oats.
The women traveled with men managing their business. Those men sat in public taverns, ready to take interested clients to their merchandise.
The most famous Roman brothel, the Bustuariae in Pompeii. Its name translates directly as the den of she-wolves. But honestly, your next-door neighbor in ancient Rome was probably running one too. Wife, sister, daughter, all involved. Family business. Why? Because the family needed money. Rent kept rising. The husband's income wasn't cutting it. Poverty and inflation drove the decision. Interestingly, the brothel districts of Rome were located in the posh, luxurious neighborhoods, not the slums, the nice part of town.
The clientele was diverse. Rich, poor, soldiers, merchants, men from every walk of Roman life came through those doors.
Now let's talk pricing. An oral service at a Roman brothel cost 2 asaran, 2 small coins. That was the going rate. The full experience? 1 asarian. The entire system was built to be accessible to virtually every man in Rome, by design. Some brothels gave clients custom tokens, a number on one side, a service position molded on the other. Silent, efficient, completely anonymous. The system was cheap, frictionless, and completely normalized. Romans simply did not consider paying for pleasure to be an act of infidelity. But Roman law also stated that a husband could legally kill a male brothel worker caught with his wife. Legally. Kill. Yes, there were male brothel workers in Rome. And somehow, Romans considered them even more socially disturbing than women in the same position. Go figure.
The money women earned never went to them. Free citizen or slave, it went straight to the men managing her. Every single coin.
Why did this industry flourish inside a so-called conservative society? The same men who wrote the moral laws also profited directly from breaking them. By the 1st century AD, some women dared to go independent, running their own business, keeping their own earnings. Rome had a plan for that too. Rome started taxing registered streetwalkers, independent women, and those taxes used to lift the burden of taxation from the wealthy class. Tax the vulnerable to protect the powerful. The privileged class couldn't claim the earnings directly, so they created a system that extracted it anyway.
Now, the Delicati, the top 1% of the industry. High-class courtesans who came from wealthy, privileged Roman families.
These women wore masks to protect their identity, but the wealthy men in their clientele, they knew exactly who was behind the mask. Further down the hierarchy, the prostibuli, women who escaped official registration, unregistered, unprotected, operating for just 2 coins. And at the absolute rock bottom, they went to the graveyard. That's where you would find the Bustuariae. Malnourished, sickly, they chalked their prices onto the backs of headstones, conducted their work inside tomb passages, the lowest rung imaginable. The worst possible situation a person could end up in the ancient world. Full stop. No commentary needed. Now here's a twist. Romans actually considered male workers in this trade to be socially worse than women in the same position. The market for men offering services to women was tiny. Social reservations made it nearly non-existent in Roman society. Of course, wealthy patrician women were above all of this. They took male lovers quietly, discreetly, always for the sake of the husband's reputation. Same-gender relationships in Rome were stigmatized in a very specific way. Being in one? Completely acceptable, as long as you weren't on the receiving end.
Unless, of course, you were the emperor. Then none of the social rules applied. Not a single one.
Emperor Nero kept multiple male concubines openly. For any ordinary Roman citizen, that was social destruction. For Nero, just a Tuesday. Emperor Hadrian, same story. Multiple male companions, openly. When you are the most powerful man in the empire, the rules simply do not apply to you. Here's the full structure of Roman society. And in every layer of this pyramid, the same rules applied. Power protected the powerful. Always. Wealth concentration at the top. Moral rules for some, none for others. Tax the vulnerable. Profit from exploitation. Rome had a very consistent playbook. Remember Lucille? Her story runs through all of it. The debt, the control, the labor with no reward. Rome wrote this story, and it kept writing it.
The Senate wrote the moral laws. The Senate also owned the brothels. In Rome, power and hypocrisy were always traveling in the same chariot.
The Colosseum, the brothels, the temples, the trade routes, all of it connected by the same system. Rome was one enormous extraction machine. This is what Rome actually was. Not just the aqueducts and the togas and the philosophers, but this, all of this, running underneath.
Your history teacher taught you Caesar, the gladiators, and the aqueducts. The rest? Never going to make the curriculum.
That's exactly why past lore exists. The stories underneath the stories. the history they never taught you in school. And Rome? Oh, we've barely scratched the surface. There's a lot more scroll left to unroll. Now the question is yours to answer. Was Rome's society fundamentally broken? Or was it just very, very honest about what it was? Let us know in the comments what you think. We read every single one. This history belongs to all of us. History isn't just the past. It's a tool. And the more you know about how power really works, the harder it is to be fooled by it. If this hit different, smash that like button, subscribe, because we're just getting started on Rome's wildest chapters.